Wee wee.
Ooh la la, oh, let's go!
Oh my gosh. Hey,
Nice to meet you, man.
nice to meet you.
I've been a fan from a distance for a while, and but your music has been very present, and your art has been very present in our house. What you've achieved over the course of the last 10 plus years, but primarily in the last 5 or 6, as the world has caught up, has been nothing short of incredible. So, heartfelt
Thank you.
congratulations to you, from me to you, man.
Thank you very much.
So we've got a lot to get into and a lot of music to play. But most importantly, right now, we've got to remind people that, you're giving a gift to the world, and we need gifts right now. We need art to show up. My line is, I never expect art to show up, but I respect it when it does. Because artists need the space to make that decision themselves and not be pushed into a corner. But I guess that space allowed you the headspace and the environment to be able to decide to bring the Hamilton movie, the capture of the show forward, and to move with the times, right? And to just throw the whole schedule up in the air and say, no, now's the time.
Yeah, I mean, we all just got the news that there's really not going to be any theater in the U.S. for the rest of the year. It just felt like, well, we're sitting on a big love letter to live theater. I mean, if Hamilton is nothing else, it is a love letter to hip hop, and it's a love letter to musical theater. And Tommy's film of it, it's what it felt like in that room during that sort of magic year when we got to do this show. And so at a time when none of us can gather, the fact that we have this sort of love letter to gathering and hearing a story is really cool.
So I wonder sort of like how that emotion felt for you going over the performance, and you talked about that magic year, and you moved on. Like, the Hamilton continued, but you just took off. And I suppose in a weird way, you've had to go home and watching this film and finishing this film, and it must have been quite emotional for you.
I think the great joy of this has been reconnecting with that company. And because, it is like a family. Like, there's the folks you talk to every day, and there's the folks you see at the cookout, and there's the folks you only see on Christmas. And sort of reconnecting with everyone. Because, when I watch the movie, I have this weird double vision. I'm enjoying the things I hadn't seen before, and the things I never could have seen from inside the show. And I'm also remembering, oh, here's where I used to freestyle with David, because it's our only moment to connect off stage in Act 2. Or, oh, here's where I would, watch Ephraim do push-ups before he got on stage. It's like I also have my backstage traffic that I'm also feeling and remembering, and all these stories I haven't thought about in years sort of flooding back of, like, you talk about hyper-focus. Like, we were strapped to a rocket, and we still had to do 8 shows a week. So that kept us humble, and that kept us sane, and we kept each other sane through what could have been a really crazy, what was a crazy year.
It was a crazy time. Look, I don't know how you do it. And I've said this to my friends in theater before. The quality and consistency required in order to achieve in theater is nothing short of incredible. When you're focused on that one thing and you've got so much wrapped up in it. And last night's performance, which was the best performance of your life, means nothing if tonight is not great.
It's a yoga, and you're going to hit the same positions every time, but some of them might feel a little worse today, or some of them might be amazing today, but it's never going to be the same. And also, like, the people who are coming to see the show tonight, they don't care about how good it was last night.
Yeah, they don't want to hear everyone else's review. It's like,
you're a restaurant. You matter as much as the dish right now.
I was talking to Josh Gad about this, and he was talking about his time in Mormon, and about the famous time that he lost his balance and lost his lines and lost his way, and it was just like, and admitted who it was that threw him off, and it was this funny little moment we had. And I wondered if that ever happened to you and what that feels like, and is it just the most stomach-churning moment of all time?
Every night. I cannot think of a night where I did a perfect show, whether it was choreography or those, that's the harder thing to do, because there's just so many words in the show, and that's my fault.
It is entirely your fault.
It's entirely, like, who can I look around to blame?
Did you ever think how hard it was going to be when you were writing it? Did you think, because a lot of artists don't think that when they're making albums, right? They go, I'm just going to make it, I'll worry about performing it live later, but it did cross your mind.
I'm painfully attuned to actors having what they need. So all of the last rewrites and stuff when we were in previews were mine. I was just like, I'll deal with my shit later. I don't want anyone else to have to deal with changes or having to memorize something at the last second. And so Hamilton's final monologue is like one of the last things I wrote, because I just thought, it's my problem. I'll deal with it. And I'll be able to perform it once I've written it. So it really was more like masochistic. It was just sort of like, giving myself the harder stuff and saving my work for last, because I wouldn't have as much trouble memorizing as someone who was getting it fresh and wasn't going through the thought process of writing it.
It does make absolute sense. And it's also quite an empathetic approach, if I may say. You call it masochistic. It's actually empathetic. And, a lot of great directors, producers, artists, they will put the people who ride with them before themselves, because also they know they can carry it. And that's not to say others couldn't, but you're challenging yourself to do the work that needs to be done. And if you can't be the one that steps up and does it, how can you expect anyone else to follow you?
Right.
It's such an achievement. Vocally, in terms of the words, in terms of the way that you took liberties with the actual historical context of some of the characters in order to try to inspire it, and didn't make it feel odd, because that could have felt odd. That could have felt like it was revisionist history, but it didn't. It felt like fact and fiction coming together in some crazy hybrid, and you got away with it. Were there times you were nervous about that aspect of it, the fact that you wanted to kind of recreate aspects of it that were really uncomfortable?
I was totally paralyzed by it, to be honest. Just the sheer tonnage of it. You read this book and Hamilton is this character, and then you read this story and he's a different person. Historians can take the same set of facts and create a totally different person. And so that became one of the themes of the show. And then my interest in his story forms its own spine. And my interest, as I sort of started, was his own relentlessness. Like, he's just a freight train. And Burr is someone who's had the same traumas in the same childhood, but is scared to move. And so what happens when a train meets someone who's scared to move, and they change each other? And so that became kind of, that revealed itself amidst all of the research you have to do and all of the biographies you have to read.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, when you're creating something that brings art and history together is that history changes shape. History is not as cut and dry as that is history. And we're seeing that very evidently right now. We're watching statues that meant something to local communities now being pulled down and defaced, because what they actually represent in the modern age and moving forward is something all more painful and more difficult. And so when you recontextualize history, even with the best of intentions, you might meet yourself 50 years down the line, and that intention may be taken a different way. Does that make sense? And so...
yeah. And it's a theme of our show, right? Hamilton did what he did, and then he's outlived by people who did not agree with him. And they all become president.
Yeah.
But also in the larger movement of things that were original sins in our country, like slavery is an original sin, a brutal system in which every character in our show is complicit. Reputations rise and fall, and that's one of the themes of the show, and it's something we're grappling with right now as we are grappling with what that statue means to some Americans versus Black Americans who were oppressed when that guy was in charge.
Correct.
I think it's an absolutely important conversation to be having.
I just wonder, broad question, what your emotions have been and how you've felt now, reviewing it and going through it like this, and beyond the behind the scenes stuff that you recognize, but just perhaps taking the chance to recognize the impact that Hamilton has had and watching the influence it's had on your peers and on other theater groups and other playwrights and other songwriters.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I have to say, it didn't really sink in the first year because I was enjoying the fruit of 7 years of writing. I finally got to perform the thing. It wasn't in my head anymore. It was in the world. And there's no describing what that feeling is, to get it off your desk and out into the populace. And then the thing that kept me humble and kept me from letting the larger impact in was, I got a show tomorrow night. I got 2 shows on Saturday. And do
you know what's working at the time while you're doing those shows? Do you get a sense that that it's connecting, that the zeitgeist is real?
Yeah. I mean, the internet was showing up at our shows. People who were heroes of mine in various fields were showing up, and the crowd outside the theater became almost untenable.
Yeah. Who do you remember seeing in the crowd? Who was the one? Who was the one that you saw in the crowd and you were just like, oh my God?
It was an aggregate. It was early at the Public, and it was Busta Rhymes was in the front row, and that's one of my favorite rappers and
of all time,
lyricists, and I was just and it was so important to me that he liked the show, so I was like, don't look at Busta Rhymes, don't look at Busta Rhymes.
I love the show B. I love the show B.
So I look up to not look at him, and Mandy Patinkin is sitting a row above him, who is the Busta Rhymes of musical theater. He's George, he's Che, he's
I just now have this image
right.
of Mandy Patinkin doing the famous scenario verse, you know? That's how I can get it out of my head now.
Oh my God, rah rah with the Dungeon Dragon and the high tenor.
Rah, yeah. I can't do a good Mandy Patinkin, but if I could, man, that would be
no one can. That's why he's Mandy Patinkin. But yeah, so that was like one where it was like literally like one from each art form I was in love with, and they were sitting basically atop each other, and I had nowhere to look. That was an early one that was very meaningful.
You know, hip hop really showed up really quickly and recognized that you were coming from an authentic place, and that's music that speaks for community, it speaks for culture, and it speaks for entertainment. But it's not just the third one. It's not. And it's really important that, you know, when you step into that environment, that you be the most authentic self you can be, and you also represent the music and the culture as authentically as you can. And that's how you get respect. And it must have been really rewarding for you as well at times to know that aside from being a fantastic slice of musical theater, a game-changing production, that a huge part of the inspiration behind what made you want to do it, respected it, loved it, wanted to see it, and loved what you were doing with it.
Yeah, I mean, hip hop's the language of revolution, and it's our greatest American art form. And so, to me, that was the initial impulse. You know, it was the fact that Hamilton got everywhere on the strength of his writing, and that's what made me. That was the whole idea. Was, well, that's what my favorite MCs do. They write so brilliantly that they transcend their circumstances and they change the world, like literally through their power of their pen and their delivery and their oratory. And so that's the fundamental idea in it. And so that's why it's such a love letter to hip hop. That's why there's so many hip hop references in the show, whether it's Biggie or Mobb Deep or DMX. They're just peppered throughout, creating the precedent of like clearances for a musical, because we did. I went and did the work. Was like, no, I want the kids who just only know musical theater, when they pick up their liner notes, they see contains a sample from 10 Crack Commandments by Notorious B.I.G. Like, I wanted to give credit where credit was due.
Did you have to reach out to Puff for that?
We had to reach out for everyone, and I'm sure my agents were like, why can't you just write it and not sample anybody? I was like, well, no, but that's part of what this is that if you like this musical, you owe it to yourself to listen to the hip hop that you maybe weren't listening to, because that's the reason this exists is my love for hip hop.
Someone called you up tomorrow and said, hey, listen, theater's opening. We got it all wrong. The virus was, we got it wrong. Everybody's fine. We're opening the theater tomorrow. We want to celebrate. We want to bring Hamilton back for one night only. We need you to step back in the shoes. Come on, man. Theater's coming back. It's opening night for the world. Hamilton's coming back. Did you do it?
I've been growing my hair out for just the occasion.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for the music, and have a great day wherever you are. All the best to you, sir.
Likewise. This was great. Thanks.